I say anything, I'm going to make sure everybody gets a chance. And okay, one more. Copy link. I will be back. Okay, so I'm back. And I'm just going to get right into it. And, everybody, when they get the notification, just, I think you'll catch up by the time we get into it. So, as I've said, I announced a video series on something that I think really needs to be talked about, and it's going to. Hopefully it's going to be in depth, and it's going to have to do with the history of World War One, World War Two. This thing called this think tank called the Frankfurt School, and where critical theory came from. The stuff that Andrew Breitbart, whose book is on the cover of this, the thumbnail of this, and what he thought about it. It's going to go into other things, modern art, the erasing of the female form, actually, and other things. So, if you're a foreigner and you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably don't want to watch this. Okay. So anyway, it's been quiet in the Star Wars community. I mean, you've got people making shit up because they have no content to write about or to talk about, and everyone's just kind of spinning their wheels. And I'm gonna have some wine while I talk to you guys. Halfway decent Pinot Noir. It's nothing I would serve to guests, but you gotta see the shit I got down in the basement. I got a good wine collection. So what it is all right. Let's go back to Andrew Breitbart, and then we're gonna preface it with this. Back when, if you remember, the Tea Party. All right, the Tea Party was a response to Black Jesus, aka Barack Obama, being elected president. And it was a pretty hardcore reaction. Now, it morphed into MAGA. Okay, I'm gonna say it morphed into MAGA. Andrew Breitbart, back in 2008, 2009, 2010, was a voice of the new right. And no, he wasn't some sort of Pat Robertson derelict, Protestant, evangelical, whoop-de-doo, all right? He was a guy that liked punk rock. He was a guy that liked culture. He liked comedy. And he liked good music. He used to do a podcast, before they were actually called podcasts, with Larry O'Connor, who's a friend of mine. And I actually did some stuff for Breitbart.com in the day. And the obscure, okay, yeah, well, this is going to be like the introduction, and then there's going to be an introduction video. Okay, upload. Cross. But good, don't take chances with these assholes. I just, no, they don't need to be here. They're probably bots hired by Kennedy, for all I know. But Andrew was a really interesting guy and a great guy. When he died, the whole community was just heartbroken. But something good came of it. Donald Trump and MAGA. Okay, that's what he opened the doors for. Okay, former Democrats who looked at the Democrat Party and said, fuck you, as Andrew would often say. you know, it's really hard to be a free speech person and support a party that censors everybody and beats everybody back and denies the opponent their right to disagree, Gina Carano. But Andrew wrote a book called Righteous Indignation, that's the thumbnail. And I have it buried in storage in the basement somewhere. I attempted to find it, and I'm not even going to dig anymore. I ordered another copy. If I find it, I will give it to a friend of mine. And in it, he did something that, all right, I'm not a fan of Glenn Beck at all. He is a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, and he's a weirdo, okay? And I used to like him, but the guy was so over the fucking top on stuff that I was like, whatever. Breitbart came along, and I was like, cool, all right. Beck talked about George Soros, his Open Society Foundation, etc. And no one had heard about him until Beck said something. And then Beck brought up Saul Alinsky. We know about the book he wrote. We know he dedicated it to Satan. And the guy was part of something called the Frankfurt School, or he followed their philosophy. Now, Beck was the one who kind of went along and started digging. Andrew dove head first in it. So this is the Frankfurt School. This is just from skimming, okay? And I used Grok to help me find some things. And if you got a really good AI tool like Grok, use it. You don't have to, he's not gonna write your script for you, but he is gonna point you in the right direction. So right, where am I going with this? I started looking into this too. Saul Alinsky was part of this group of people, and it started this. It's basically the Frankfurt School was a think tank at the University of Frankfurt in Germany, and they were Marxists. So it's cultural Marxism, okay, and they saw that, well, you can go to the working class and tell them they're being screwed over by the owners, and that works. But you've got to get to the American middle class who's like, we're happy, fuck off, you know? And cultural Marxism was designed to attack the foundations of the representative republic that America is. Okay, so it started in Germany, and then the other form of socialism, the Nazis, showed up and ran these Marxists out. I'm going to say there's a morphing going on because you can't, if you're a Marxist, you can't own anything, right? And look at all the people who are Marxists, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, etc. They own all kinds of shit. Okay, just think about that. So are they collectivists? Are they corporatists, which would be fascists, which would be Nazis? Or are they Marxists, which I think Lenin would say, no, no, they're not. Okay, because they don't, the way they live doesn't conform to the philosophy. Okay, so a lot of them showed up in the United States. Now, I don't have the names of all of them, but they lived in Santa Monica. I mean, near where my friend Cameron lives. They could look at the beach all day, and they hated the individualism. They hated the capitalism they saw. They hated the fact that people were happy and cheery. Americans, at least back then, weren't at each other's throats. And dare I say, hi Melchizedek. I'm going to tell you guys, Melchizedek right there is a friend of mine, a very, very good dare I say, my best friend. So just say hi to him. He's cool. He's number one. Anyway, and these guys just could not understand. So they went to undermine um, the middle class, right? And they became professors. The philosophy of cultural Marxism disguised as critical theory went out to the masses. Okay, so that's funny, Cross. So anyway, what you have then is a bunch of people getting into, dare I say, the culture, films, music, writing, literature, the media, right? Don't tell me that some of those great newsmen of the day weren't fucking Marxists. They were. All right, Edward R. Murrow? Yeah, okay, come up. Arthur Miller? He's lucky he didn't get thrown in prison, right? In fact, it got so bad that Marilyn Monroe herself was being followed by the government because they were afraid she was. All right, and look, back then, people were right about that. These people are insidious. They're um they have to go. They have to be prevented from, you know. But again, cultural Marxism takes into account free speech and the American Constitution to undermine it. So they could say things. They could attack the the underpinnings of American society. Now, I am going to go a little further, and I'm going to have to go pretty soon because my phone is dying again. Um, anyway, I'm going to talk about this. Go to a different thing. So I've told you about these cultural Marxists that get into schools, they teach. They're teaching, I'll give you a quick bio of Kathleen Kennedy. Her dad was a Democrat operative. He was a judge. She was born in Berkeley, California, and she has a twin sister and she has another sister, right? They were Democrats way, way back. Now, it's interesting to note when Stalin approached going after the American society, he knew the culture was where to go for it, right? And, he even went to the point where he tried to have John Wayne, this is a story I heard, assassinated, and the FBI found out about it, so they're like, hey, Duke, you know? So John Wayne and his friends, I can imagine maybe Ronald Reagan himself was part of this, even though they didn't know each other until about the mid-50s, so maybe he wasn't, figured out who it was and staged a mock execution at night on one of California's beaches. And he was never bothered again. Okay, so there you go. I don't know if the story is true. As someone who thinks the Duke was pretty cool, I think that would have been really funny. Wrong guy, right? Okay. But yeah, so Kathleen Kennedy was raised in a very hardcore left-wing house, a liberal household, right? She went to school, I think, at the University of San Diego, California. And I think she was taught by a bunch of cultural Marxists, taught critical theory, even though she didn't know what it was because they were able to disguise it. What these people set out to do was to create a series of creatives that weren't creative, they were activists, right? So let's go into my next thing. And I'll talk more about Kennedy later, but there's other things. When you look at this, the Star Wars story group, which I think doesn't really exist much anymore, um, uh, and you start doing research and trying to find bios of these people, the only one that I can find is Pablo Hidalgo. And I'm gonna kind of chime in on uh, Pedro Pascal too. He was born in Chile. His parents fled Chile, and they ended up in Canada. If you go and see what he's been posting on Blue Skies, because he basically left X. He basically left X completely. He may have a false account to see what people are saying about him, but from what my friend said, he does what they can see is all he does is post shit on X on Blue Sky. He was raised by somebody who supported Allende in Chile. He was that guy was the gross Marxist filthy pig that Augusto Pinochet basically overturned. And yeah, he is. Um, they both did see man. They both did. Okay. And when you see the stuff he posts, it's ignorant. He knows nothing about the United States. He doesn't know anything about the government and the Constitution. No respect for individual rights. You are not, look, these guys, Pedro too, were raised not to be individuals. There's no sense of individuality in anything they say or do. Okay? And when I get the messages and I get the screenshots, I'm like, this guy's a fucking idiot. And he's purposely ignorant. He lives in San Francisco. He could he could go to the American Heritage Foundation and read the Constitution, right? Get an idea. He could actually go to the Federalist Papers and read them. So could Pedro, right? Pedro's very interesting, but Pedro isn't really about this. He's just another mouth for the critical theory people. Pedro is from a very entitled family. It's almost like landed gentry in Chile. They were allies and friends of Allende. And I'm going to say this, that when you have homosexuality in your, like amongst you, that usually it's from a family of people who were raised with a lot of money and not a lot to do. Okay, let me explain something. Wealthy people are the weirdest motherfuckers on the planet because they have way too much money and nothing to do. All right, they don't pursue the virtues, right? They get bored and they start doing really weird shit. They get into really weird shit. You know, the Eyes Wide Shut parties that Cameron talks about? They're real. And those people are bored and they get into it and they start, all this occult stuff. Like, there's a picture of Gloria Vanderbilt on a couch or a bed, and above her, behind her, is an occult picture. And what it looks like to me, a high priestess of something. There's a dead body in a box, and it looks like spirit cooking. It's gross. But I'm not going to say that the robber baron that started that dynasty, I think it's Cornelius Vanderbilt, was part of that. Andrew Carnegie wasn't part of that. John Rockefeller, the guy, the first Rockefeller, wasn't part of that. If they came back and saw their great-great-grandchildren, they kill them. They were given too much and had no expectations, right? That's the problem. Pedro Pascal, he's got a brother who runs around pretending he's a girl. And every time the guy is misgendered or dead named, Pedro has a stroke. You gotta ask Pedro, why don't you have a girlfriend? You know, to me it's like, if you're gay, then you're gay. But don't share it with me because I don't want to know. I'm 20,000 feet, like 5,000 billions of miles away from not giving a fuck. So don't bring me into it. Okay? Don't. All right? There's a point where toleration invites some really bad shit. I mean, Fulton Sheen had a whole thing about that. So, but going back to Pablo, he was never, when you look at his bio, and I encourage anybody out there to get the Wikipedia and look at him, he was never what I would consider a creative. He's a techie, right? He built on contract the Star Wars website for Lucasfilm. And it's like, this guy's an activist. This guy's exactly what the Frankfurt School of Philosophy, the critical theory people, wanted in the culture. And I'm going to find the video where he was called out by a YouTuber for telling a podcaster and his friend behind their back, behind closed doors, that they were dumping the EU and that they were going to indoctrinate the kids. That's exactly what the Frankfurt School wants to do. Now, that being said, because I'm going to talk about the deconstruction, and I've talked about the deconstruction of Han and Luke and Leia. And when you look at that, and you look at the philosophy behind the people that taught Pablo Hidalgo, that taught, now think about it. While we were all looking for jobs and just trying to run our lives, these people were working very diligently to get into the culture so they could fuck with us. And that's exactly what they did and have done. I mean, look at Paul Feig, look at Ghostbusters 2016, right? I mean, if The Force Awakens isn't a giant, what the hell did I just see? And not just woke, but why would they do that to these iconic characters? And then, of course, subverting expectations. I think I might devote an entire, if I can find a bio for Ryan Johnson that's legit, I'm going to talk about it. No, they don't like the Star Wars I made because, look, as Bill Maher says, the Marxists always wanted to remake humankind not to be selfish. Good luck on that, because they failed miserably. And what's interesting to note is all these people, Ashley Sharp, she's one of the people in the Thori group. She's got she, her, on her fucking LinkedIn account. I wouldn't hire her to walk Kojak. I wouldn't hire her to clean up his shit in the yard. Why? I don't want those people around me. It's insidious. And I'm going to say woke, but it's not just woke. It is cultural Marxism, as Andrew Breitbart so succinctly said back in 2011, 2010, right? He was the heavy metal punk rocker that walked out and said, what the fuck is going on? And he was right. And what's interesting is now you've got people who didn't like conservatives, like, Johnny Rotten, and etc., calling out the left for this very thing. J.K. Rowling, Think about what she's doing to protect women from men being in locker rooms and showing up in bathrooms and all, like women's bathrooms and shit. You know, it's like it is against human nature. You cannot change human nature. The one thing that National Socialism and Mussolini's socialism did is they understood you can't change human nature. So instead, they riled up pride, envy, and greed, right? The deadly sins, all of them, into their, basically into what they believed to get people to look at the other. There's always going to be an other. When you open up Alinsky's, God, what was that book called? I can't remember. Um, uh, it's a book about tactics against the right. One of my favorites is always blame the enemy for things you're doing. Okay. And pick a target and then focus on him. So that's what Pablo did that. Kennedy's done that. You know, they did that to Gina. All right, that's a fact. Oh my God, that is the perfect target. Find the target and then do everything you can to destroy the target. To the point where she was invited to get screamed at by 40 people who probably weren't even LGBTQ because her not wanting to go along with the flow made them feel uncomfortable. That's called a struggle session. That is right out of Alinsky. That is right out of cultural Marxism. And Pablo Hidalgo, I guess, is the biggest example that I can find because I can't find Ashley Sharp's bio. I can't find Jason Stein's bio. I can't find Phil Strozak's bio, or Stozak. Okay? Rain Roberts, she's already gone, so she doesn't fucking matter. Max Taylor, he's gone too. And I think a lot of them have left, but what I'm saying is the sequel trilogy, the deconstruction of everything George built, is an example of critical theory, what these activists put out there, including their fucking novels, the writers they hired, Justina Ireland, Claudia Gray. Hey Dave, how you doing, man? You know, all this stuff, and you're like, it's critical theory and it's cultural Marxism. These people are not creatives. They are activists. And they are out there waving their red guard flags in our faces, all right? And I'm like, it just hit me. I was talking to Baz Taylor, and we were talking about it, right? And I thought, you know what's funny? As we've talked about the deconstruction of Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Leia, because she was deconstructed, we talked about what they did to George's vision, and they undermined it. The sequel trilogy just makes the OG irrelevant, which is exactly what Kennedy wanted. And why? Because she is a cultural Marxist. She is a, look at the art they collected. Socially aware art. None of it was really beautiful except for the jazz musicians. I wouldn't have that shit in my house. I want, landscapes and wildlife prints and famous race horses on my walls. I want, movie posters and things like that. I don't want that activist garbage. I don't. It's like I want you guys to go find Andrew Klavan's interview with Matt Fradd. Doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not. There's one, and I'm gonna get Baz to grab it for me because I want to be able to really watch it and maybe even grab a couple of things. Talks about the erasing of women in art. You go from the Blessed Mother and her, her flowing robes and how beautiful women were to pornography and then completely being erased. That is cultural Marxism. And when you look at the artwork that was created by them, to the point where, you've got drip paintings of just dripping paint on a canvas. And, that's at the time, that's the zeitgeist. But I don't want that in my house. This was, I'm going to let you guys go with this. This was the example I gave to Baz. You've got Gustav Klimt, the main leader of the Viennese secession movement of art. And you've got Egon Schiele. You look at what they did, the beautiful colors Klimt used and the way he used gold is just absolutely. I've seen the paintings in real life. They're absolutely amazing. The Kiss. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that. It's you can't not look at it. Then you look at Egon Schiele, and it's nightmarish. Klimt, I'm going to say probably a libertine artist. Jewish, by the way, I think. Schiele, obviously emotional issues, devoid of the spirit. When God is not present, the creature dies. You're looking at a dead creature here on the Schiele side. When the passion, and I'm going to say God because George has said to his kids, we're Methodists and we're Buddhists. Okay, that's what George wants. That's what George gets. When God isn't allowed, the creature dies, right? So you deconstruct Han Solo, drunk, deadbeat dad Han Solo. You deconstruct Leia to the point where you've got lesbians squatting on her character. Completely ignoring the OG, completely ignoring the EU because they have no interest in this. And if they'd read it, it would undermine their psychosis, right? Luke, he goes from being the optimistic Jedi to a hermit, and now on Wikipedia, he's listed as a fag. Mark Hamill doesn't say a word about that. I would get pissed. I've told him and said, you need to talk to them about that. And the reason simply is, and Dave is right. They want to squat on the characters that George created that have been who they were for 50 years. All right. I mean, and I would look if I could start, if I had Elon Musk's money, and by the way, I'm pissed off at him right now, and you guys know why. If I had his money, I would buy Wikipedia from fandom. And then I would fire everybody that fucking worked for it. I would clamp it down so it couldn't be edited. And I'd have my people get rid of all the fucking pronouns and the gay shit. Just get all of it off there. And the sequel trilogy will be highlighted in a box. Right? You want Star Wars? Here's Star Wars. Here's a sequel trilogy. That's not Star Wars. The other franchise, right? And they can't deal with something greater than themselves. Right? They're anti-individual rights. But they want you to fall down and worship at their feet because they need to be there. Look, cultural Marxism creates narcissists It creates a psychosis. Look at all the girls that are growing up that are mentally ill. Look at them. I mean, we have them in my family, right? Emotional support cats. You're 20 years old. You're 21. What the fuck? Go live your life. Get a job. Do your schoolwork and get a boyfriend. Stop. The hell's wrong with you? You know, 40% of women under the age of 30 are mentally ill. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, you know, it feeds on mental illness, right? I think that the internet has fed that, has, you know, look, many exorcists have said that when the internet came out, the devil went, we got it in. And he was right. These guys are right. Because they can use technology. And yes, I'm Catholic. And yes, the devil exists. If you can sit there and say, well, evil exists and you know the devil exists, so there you go. But, you know, I wanted to give you guys a little idea on what I'm doing. I've got to do my research. And again, like I said, this is for Dave. I have somewhere in the basement Andrew Breitbart's Righteous Indignation. I have it. I have the book. I read it cover to cover, and I was hoping if Andrew showed up in the San Diego area that I could have him sign it. And then he died. And I'm going to tell you guys straight out before I go. I think he was murdered. He said before he died that he had a story that was so explosive and he was going to start posting it on Breitbart the week later. I mean, and I think it was about what's going on in Hollywood. I think it was about P. Diddy. I think it was about Oprah Winfrey. I think it was about Brian Lord. And I think it was about a lot of these fucking people, right? Then, not too long afterwards, a leftist investigative reporter got a hold of a story and was like, I'm fearing for my life. I'm whatever. His car exploded on the 405. Those aren't coinky dinks. All right, that's not a coinky dink. I mean, the late great Gary Graham, who is a friend of mine, told me straight out Andrew was murdered, and he knew Andrew. I mean, he knew that he knew it. I mean, the guy walked down to a restaurant to have dinner with his wife, and I think they had some friends. I don't know I can't remember the whole thing. Walked out of the restaurant, his face suddenly turns bright red, and he dies of a heart attack. What? Now, granted, everybody knew he had heart issues because he was a fucking caffeine addict, maniac, you know, and the left liked to scream that he was into coke, and he's like, no, he wasn't into coke. The guy drank probably Red Bull or some shit like that. And he was very honest about he wouldn't stop. You know, and it's just somebody crying about basically the National Guard going in to help remove illegal aliens from California. Oh, look, the faggot, Prakar. Fuck you, asshole. So anyway, what's going on here is, by the way, your women are ugly. They're fucking ugly. How's that one? The most beautiful women in the world are Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, and German, and Austrian. to the rest of you. All right. Um, and I don't care what you think. It's true. All right. It's true. So, so when Andrew died and then uh, and then they turn into needing to trim their mustaches. Ick. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm being a bitch right now. I'm being completely catty. So anyway, I mean, I'm like going, here's the thing. You've got something going on in the world. These cultural Marxists show up at Lucasfilm, at Marvel. Look at Victoria Alonso, right? She wasn't a creative. She couldn't create a decent sized poop, for Christ's sakes. Kathleen Kennedy, who's never been creative in her whole fucking life. I I want to know if she even had her children. I'm gonna go Candace Owens on her. And the reason why is because she doesn't look like she ever had children in her life. Women who've had kids, even if they're in really great shape, like J Lo, who probably signed the devil's contract, and others, look good, but they don't look like that. And I'm gonna say those two girls were adopted, and whatever, that's fine. I don't care. But none of these people were creatives. Like, I'm gonna give you an example. I was gonna go, but I'm not. George Lucas, hippie, old school hippie, and he was. Francis Ford Coppola, older hippie. Harrison Ford, major league hippie. I mean, I've seen some pictures of him that's like, oh, dude, really? Steven Spielberg, younger hippie. You know, those guys go to bed at night looking under their beds to make sure that, their version of Hitler, poor Richard Nixon's disembodied head, is in hiding under there to scare him at night. They're not woke. And the cultural Marxists are going after them, right? Because there's being liberal and then there's being, again, J.K. Rowling, what are trainees trying to do? Erase women. That's what they're trying to do. They could all just, well, I'm not going to say that, but, and that's the thing. This is what I'm going to. Yeah, and it's that's the first thing I thought of. And it's like, Tricky Dick wasn't the guy you thought he was. This is all like this mythology. I mean, when I hear George compare Palpatine to him, I'm like, oh, fuck. No, actually, Palpatine's more like Hillary Clinton. And it's true. I mean, just ask anybody who had to work for her, and I have. And I was the girl that would walk past her Senate office with my friends when we were going across to go to meet our friends at K. Bailey Hutchison's office, singing, Chelsea's mom is a big fat bitch, she's the biggest bitch in the whole wide world. She's a mean old bitch, if there ever was a bitch, she's a bitch, 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 bitch. That was her song, in fact. We sang that leaving the Memorial Day concert in 2001. People were just either laughing and cheering or going, in Washington, we didn't give a shit. we didn't care. We were already drunk, by the way. It's just one of those things where you're kind of like, what are you talking about? I mean, what the hell are you talking about? But it's their mythology. But when you start bringing up men can be women, no. Um, Changing film. I mean, even Steven Spielberg has been heard saying, you don't change films to suit the time. You don't. That was a direct reference to Kathleen Kennedy, right? That was a direct reference to her. George called people who destroyed cultural artifacts. Star Wars is a cultural artifact. Barbarians. And I call people like Pablo Hidalgo, Matt Martin, Phil Stozak, and the rest of them cultural Taliban. Hey, 007. Yeah, Dave, I've actually talked to people who actually, military aides that Rudy knew, she treated them like shit. Hillary treated them like shit. Now, Richard Nixon was a lot of things, but he would never do that to a guy in uniform. That's just whatever. Anyway, I gotta go because I have 12%. 007, you're gonna have to rewind this because I got 12% on my phone and it's gonna die, so I'm gonna have to power it up. But you guys, have a good evening and get ready. I'm gonna try to get something out tomorrow. But we'll see. Anyway, I will talk to y'all later. See you around the galaxy.